A few days ago, I called the fake news the enemy of the people, and they are. They are the enemy of the people.
The brawl between the press and the president continues, but is it now harming the country? Talking Points will deal with it tonight. Organized protests disrupting political meetings. Is that un-American or patriotic?
What is the greatest problem facing this country today?
Everyone complains too much.
What are we going to do about these babies?
Whip them into shape. Make America tough again.
Also ahead, Waters down at the Daytona 500. Caution, you are about to enter the no spin zone. The factory begins right now. Hi, I'm Bill O'Reilly. Thanks for watching us tonight. War between President Trump and the press. That is the subject of this evening's Talking Points memo. Critical mass has now been reached as the Trump administration is denying access to certain news organizations it believes are out to get the president. Also, in an act of defiance, the president announced he will not show up to this year's White House Correspondents' Dinner in April. He does, however, want everybody to have a good time. If this political controversy were a legal case, and if I were the judge, I'd have to recuse myself. That's because for the past 20 years, I've watched the liberal media in America scorch the Fox News channel and the people who work here, including me. The attacks are personal, relentless, and often dishonest. Just last week, after Alan Colmes passed, a far-left smear website vilified him as a weak liberal, a calculated pawn for this network. Does it get any worse than that? No, it does not. So there's no question that if the national media does not like your politics, it will try to hurt you, even if you're deceased. Anyone denying that is a deceiver. Of course, the Trump administration is well aware of this. It knows the media is desperately trying to link the Trump campaign to Russia and will use anonymous sources to drive that narrative in the hope the election will be perceived as invalid. By the way, we do not use anonymous sources here. I've been told plenty of bad stuff about Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, but without attribution, it's not going to be reported. The president also understands that certain news organizations despise him to the point that employees actually fear for their jobs if they say positive things about him. Many left-wing editors and executives believe Mr. Trump's positions on illegal immigration, Muslim terrorism, global warming, abortion, crime, and just about every other issue define the president as a dangerous man who must be destroyed. Therefore, anyone supporting him cannot be tolerated. There will be no détente. The gulf is too wide. It will be one nasty media confrontation after another until the president leaves office. Now, it's difficult to see how this awful situation benefits anyone. The country's not helped by all the acrimony. Talking Points believes the president has a right to defend himself, but should do so using facts. If a report is wrong, fake news, have Sean Spicer vividly refuted in detail. If access is denied to certain press organizations, again, specifically spell out why. If you don't, you come off as petulant. Facts will always win the debate, always, as we prove on this program every night. As for the Correspondents' Dinner, the president's smart for not going. Like him or not, he's not big on hypocrisy. Yucking it up with an industry that obviously wants to hurt him would be bizarre. So send the vice president and a nice donation to the dinner scholarship fund that helps students. Cold fact is, the presidential election of 2016 defined the free press in America. It is actively left-wing, not objective. But now things have become so much worse than just ideology. Now it's war. And that's a memo. So let's have some reaction with us here in New York City. Joe Concha, media writer for The Hill. Merrill Brown, director of Montclair State University School of Communication. Where am I going wrong here, Professor Brown?
You're going wrong because you're lumping the media into one little ball, and it's many things. The media is Slate, a publication you just cited. The media is National Review. The media is the Weekly Standard. The media is Fox. The media is CBS. The media is MSNBC. There are divergent points of view on each one of those publications, and they cover the president and the administration differently.
All right, so there's a divergent point of view on MSNBC?
Different from the point of view on this network,
oh, okay.
For sure.
I don't think that. So if you add up all the news organizations on a national basis, okay? What percentage of people working for those news organizations would you consider liberal?
An overwhelming percentage. I would bet the vote for
You're an honest man. Overwhelming.
Overwhelming.
Okay. So now when you have overwhelmingly one ideology, and then you have a president who is unacceptable to them, I would say, wouldn't that word be accurate? Donald Trump's unacceptable to the New York Times, the LA Times, the Washington Post, because he's not, he doesn't have the gravitas for the job. I think that's what.
Not legitimate. You used
Right.
the word war before, and I think that's appropriate. And sometimes wars are fought in different ways. There's open bias, there's advocacy that you've pointed out many times in the show. But then there's also the bias of omission. And what I see is a media that reflexively goes towards the negative with Donald Trump. And let me give you a big example from this weekend. NBC News Wall Street Journal poll talks about approval, disapproval for the president. He's at 44 approve, 48 disapprove. And that dominated headlines. But there were two questions within there, Bill, that were not reported almost in any fashion that are very important, very compelling. You could see it as very positive. First was right track, wrong track. 40% of Americans believe that we're on the right track now. You know what that number was in July? 18%. It's more than doubled, not reported anywhere. How's the economy doing? Do you think it'll get better or worse under President Trump? 41% say it will get better. Only 21% say worse. That's how people vote. Was that part of the poll reported? No, it was not. So the bias of omission is the most dangerous kind of bias you could have, and that's what I see a lot of reporters engaging in, not focusing on the positive.
Bill, it's an unusual presidency, right? I think we can agree on that.
Yeah.
And Trump is an unusual president.
Right.
And he's not released his tax returns where all his predecessors in recent times have. That's likely to create a level of tension between press and president that I think you and I could agree is legitimate.
No, I'm not so upset about. I mean, I wish he would, because that's always better to have a full view of the leader. But that's not a major issue for me, releasing a tax return. He's a businessman. You assume that he's taken a lot of deductions and a lot of things like that, depreciations, which will not be reported accurately by the press. It won't. He knows it. But let me throw this at you. Fox News poll out today, just out, all right? 55% of the American people have no confidence in the media, Professor. 55%. Why do you think that is?
It is because there's been a history of inadequate coverage by the media of lots of things, right and left.
You don't think it's a Trump thing?
I think it's in part a Trump thing. The media have been hard on Trump, and the 40% of the country that supports him don't like that.
Do you think the media was hard on President Obama?
The media was not as hard on President Obama as they've been on President Trump.
See, right there you have a rigged system. It's rigged. Trump likes that word. It's rigged. But it is rigged, and it shouldn't be, because this is too important. Now, you say it's a war, and obviously Talking Points agrees with you. I don't. Talking Points does.
Oh, of course. He's a good guy, Talking Points.
And people don't understand that when you can use Talking Points as a device. It's a literary device. But anyway, let's get back to you.
Yes.
I don't see the war ending. I just can't see it, because the press has hardened its left-wing viewpoint. It's hardened it. And Trump is never going to give in to them, ever.
The war began under President Obama, I would argue. James Risen, he writes for the New York Times, not exactly a bastion of conservative sentiment. He said that President Obama and his administration was the most anti-press since Nixon. And I'll give you 3 reasons why. They openly spied his Justice Department on reporters, including James Rosen, from this network.
Fox News.
They secretly seized phone records from the Associated Press, 2 months' worth. And there wasn't this outrage, this boycotting of a White House Correspondents' Dinner or threats to boycott. They rejected more FOIA requests, Freedom of Information Acts, than any administration in history. President Obama was anti-Trump.
Quietly. He did it.
Well, that's the thing. Those are actions.
Right.
And the press is now mad about Trump's words.
Right.
I base somebody on their actions, and we didn't hear a peep about it under Obama, and certainly people weren't boycotting the White House Correspondents' Dinner over it.
Let's give the professor the last word.
Well, excluding people from White House briefings is not going to do anybody any good. You know that the press is likely going to win that one, inevitably. Excluding the press from access to documents like tax returns, that's also not in anybody's interest. And transparency, I think, will get us past this, and the war might at least quiet down.
I doubt it. Number one, he's never going to release his tax returns. He's going to have to. And number two, it's just going to get worse.
The biggest story of the next 4 years, Trump versus media, I guarantee you.
Particularly if President Trump's successful. The more successful he gets, the more the hatred's going to rise to try to take him out somehow.
This is not about policy, Bill. It's about a lot of other things.
No, I agree with that. Is personality involved with this? Is power involved with this? Style involved?
That hatred also has a boomerang effect.
The press would
People see it, and they actually end up supporting Trump as a
The
result.
press would much rather be debating defense spending today than these issues, I assure you.
No, they'd much rather impeach him and get him out of there. That's what they want to do. Gentlemen, thank you. Next on the rundown, more vandalism at Jewish cemeteries. Is hatred on the rise in the USA? Charles Krauthammer has some thoughts. And later, some protesters running wild at political meetings. Are they being directed by a far-left group called Indivisible? Those reports after these messages. Over the weekend in Philadelphia, another Jewish cemetery was vandalized. Many as 100 headstones at the Mount Carmel Cemetery knocked over and desecrated. In addition, a number of Jewish community centers have received bomb threats around the country, leaving some to say hate's on the rise in America. Joining us from Washington, Charles Krauthammer. Think hate's on the rise?
Well, the only way to know that will be in retrospect from, say, a year or two. We've often had spasms of incidents many times, much of them being copycats. A lot of these are today in Washington. A couple of Jewish community centers, a couple of schools were shut down or at least evacuated because of bomb threats. But I think the real story is here that they are highlighting, or at least we are seeing highlighted in the press, anti-Jewish incidents. Now, why is that? The story for the last 15 years, at least the one that's presented by the press, has been Islamophobia. All the incidents targeting Muslims. Of course, trying to portray Americans as reacting to Islamic terrorism in a beastly way. But during those 15 years, and certainly for the last 5 or so, the number of anti-Jewish incidents has been far greater and almost totally underreported. There are about 4 times as many anti-Semitic incidents over most of these years. In the last year, there was a slight changing of that ratio to about still more than 2 to 1. And the hypothesis I would propose to you is the storyline during the Bush years and to a less extent the Obama years had to be the beastliness of Americans towards Muslims, of course now reinforced with the Trump actions. But now we get this attention to these anti-Semitic incidents. True, there seems to be somewhat of an increase, but again, it's only a couple of months. We don't know if it's going to last. And I think the press, or at least the implication is, this, of course, is somehow connected to the Trump ascendancy. He is encouraging it in subliminal ways. He hasn't been strong enough in denouncing it, etc. So I am not yet impressed that there has been a great rise of anti-Semitism in the country.
Okay.
It could be true, but I'm not sure
I don't know what would
these incidents
drive
are reflecting it.
I don't know what would drive that. There isn't a driver apparent, but I do believe with you it's copycat stuff, and some nuts see this and then they go out and do the same thing, and that usually subsides. Now
let me just say one thing.
Go ahead.
It is real in the lives of the people
absolutely.
who work in the communities, who work in the schools, and the parents of the kids. So, I
Nobody wants to
understand
be
that.
terrorized by bomb threats or have their cemeteries desecrated. It's outrage. And Attorney General Sessions said that today. He said this is not going to be tolerated, and let's hope that the federal government is on it, and these people are prosecuted who do this stuff.
Well, what I want to caution against is the instinct among many to link this with Trump. We don't know if it's a real increase yet. We will see. That's number one. And number two, show me the connection.
All right, but they don't care about showing you anything if they can link it to Trump. They're going to link it to Trump. And
Right.
That's the age we live in.
If there's an earthquake or a comet
it's
strike,
be
you
his
can
fault.
be sure.
Yeah, you know, look, we just did that with the press. We know the press hates him. I don't think that Trump's going to pull back from the press. He's going to continue to confront them, and the war is going to go on. Hey, Charles, always good to have you on. Thank you. Directly ahead, protesters disrupting political meetings. What should we think about these people? And later, one Hollywood actor calling his peers out on the refugee issue. Factors coming right back. Back to follow-up segment tonight. All across the country, political meetings are being disrupted by disenchanted Americans.
We pray in Jesus' name.
I could tell you 3 members of my family, including me, that would be dead, and homeless if it was not for ACA.
Homeless. Now, some believe many of those protests are organized. There's a group called Indivisible. Actually has an online guide telling folks how to disrupt meetings. Indivisible, run by far-left fanatics, but it's impossible really to know how extensive their influence is. Joins Washington, Jillian Turner, Fox News analyst here in New York City. Abby Huntsman, co-host of Fox and Friends Weekend. The ladies debated this issue last week on Outnumbered, and I'd like to continue that discussion tonight. How do you see this? You know, your father's a politician, right?
He is.
Okay, so he Utah, he holds a little meeting. Come on in. I want to hear you beef. I want to get back and forth. And then you have people screaming and yelling, jumping up and down.
He would love this. He thinks this is what a democracy is all about.
Robust yelling?
You know what? He would still show up. He would say, you know what, if you don't, it's weak. You got to do your job. You got to go and you got to talk about the issues you're passionate about. These have gotten out of hand. And the problem that I have with these protests, Bill, is you don't know what their agenda is. What is their platform? You compare it to like the Tea Party movement or the Wall Street movement.
It's
right?
hard to say. But look, Jillian, you were sympathetic to the protesters on Outnumbered, all right? If you're a politician and you're in there and you've got 40 or 50 people, you can't have chaos break out and get anywhere. You can't have yelling and screaming and jumping up and down and throwing chairs. And that's what this crew, Indivisible, recommends, that they go in, scatter all over the auditorium, start to yell and scream and hoot down anybody they disagree with. Surely that's not democracy, is it?
Well, it's absolutely democracy. Whether these people are being well behaved is something else that we could debate.
How is it democracy, Jillian? How is screaming and making it impossible to get a dialogue on both sides so the politician could give answers and information? How's that democracy?
Well, because the whole purpose of holding a town hall in the first place is not about highlighting members of Congress and how wonderful and fabulous are, right? The whole purpose is so that citizens can air their grievances and their concerns. I agree with you that people shouldn't act like hooligans, but if they are, I still think that the representatives have an obligation to show up and be there.
And do what? And just and get yelled at? And
yeah, essentially. Well, I mean, I don't agree with screaming and rioting and throwing things.
Okay, so Jillian, you're a politician then, and you have a town hall meeting, and people come and they purposely disrupt it so that you cannot have a civil dialogue. You cannot give information. What do you do with those people?
Well, there were still at some of these, like I was looking at the video of the Chaffetz town hall that, as far as I can tell, kind of kicked all this stuff off. And there was definitely room in there over the course of an hour and a half for kind of civil exchanges as well. I mean, sometimes the people flared up and they were all agitated, and then other times people who appeared to be kind of normal, respectful citizens would interject with questions, and that's the part that I want to protect here. I'm not trying to protect the badly behaved people.
But you dodged my question. You didn't give an answer. What you would do with the disruptors? What would you do?
I think you have to have separate. That's a separate issue.
Separate bathrooms for them?
You've got to have separate channels and work out your issues with them, but don't deny private citizens.
I have big giant guys, and they take them and they like this. What do you do?
Bill, what would you do if people tried to stop you from doing your job every day, from speaking to the American people? Would you say, okay, I'm not going to come and do the show today? What would you do?
Well, I don't have that because we have Fox security here, and if somebody tries to intrude on our
but they have security there as well. I mean, most
see, that's what I mean.
Do.
That's the question. If you're there and you're a sitting senator or congressperson and somebody won't give up the mic and is screaming obscenities or doing like that, do you have them removed? I do.
So I spent a lot of time living in Beijing, China, and I have seen protests get cracked down within 2 minutes. And I remember those experiences and thinking, you know what, I will never, ever think.
That's not the same thing.
It's not the same thing, but it does remind me how lucky we are to live in a country where we are allowed to protest.
So would you remove them or not?
The protesters?
Yes, if they were totally out of hand and didn't sit down when they were asked to and screamed and yelled and disrupted the whole proceeding. Remove or not?
Well, I think it's a gray line.
A gray line.
Right? How do you determine?
So Jillian wants to work it out with them and take them out for a little latte, and then what do you got? You have a little gray paint? Just paint that little line?
No,
Come on, you're both wishy-washy.
I think if it gets really out of hand and it's obviously a place that's not safe, then you got to do something about it.
Well, if they're screaming at you, all right, and they won't stop.
You're terrified, Bill. You would be so scared.
But
really?
Bill, that's just a democracy, though, no?
I think that if you can't stand up, if you can't stand constituents yelling at you, then you really should find a different job, because part of your job is to respond to these.
Our elected officials do not have to take abuse. They don't have to take abuse, and especially if it's organized in a disruptive way. They don't. And that's why security should be there, and they should be given a warning and be polite. We want to hear what you have to say, but if you're cursing and using the F word and offending everybody, out of there. Okay, ladies, you're a lot nicer than I am, but everyone knew that.
Phil, we didn't know you were so sensitive and that you can get so easily offended.
I know, I'm shocked.
I need a safe space. I need a safe space.
We're safe in here.
Plenty more ahead as the factor moves along this evening. Not all Hollywood actors are left wing. Robert Davi says the Bleeding Heart should take in refugees if they're so concerned. We'll discuss it. And Waters down at the Daytona 500.
What is the biggest problem facing this country today?
Race fans.
You better whisper that. You're surrounded by about 100,000 of them.
We hope you stay tuned for those reports. Personal story segment tonight. I watched a little bit of the Academy Award telecast last night. Wasn't over the top. I thought Kimmel did a pretty good job. But as usual, the political comments were all left-wing. However, not all actors are liberals. Here's what Robert Davi recently told Neil Cavuto.
For my Hollywood colleagues, well, I wrote a piece on it the other day. I tell them to just lighten up right now, Neil. I want to have them invite all the immigrants, all the refugees, all the migrants, all the illegal criminals. I think we should open up the rules for the Academy. It'd be a good idea. Let's just forget the rules. Forget the rules for the studio. Let's open the gates in Bel Air and let people camp out. I think it's time that we really show our hearts in good faith. Why have any boundaries at all?
Mr. Davi being facetious. Joining us from Boston to respond, Marianne Marsh. From Washington, Katie Pavlich. So this is more of a philosophy thing, Katie. It's, all right, if you're going to advocate for open borders, as many, many left-wingers are doing, you know, well, you got to put them up. When they come on in, you got to put them up. And you say?
I don't think that you should literally have to put them up, but the issue here is that Hollywood elites, Hollywood liberals, like to preach to the rest of the country about what they should do, that they're intolerant, that they're bigoted, and yet they don't seem to put any of the work into making sure that these people have housing, what the cost to the taxpayer is, what the national security risk is to bringing in refugees from countries that don't have central governments. And so the philosophy of saying one thing and doing another certainly applies to Hollywood. It's not just on the refugee or immigration issue.
Well,
it's
certainly
the global warming and gun
though,
control and all of that as well.
I know liberal Hollywood actors who give a lot of money to charities that help migrants and that help certain people that they support. So I don't think it's fair to, on a condemnation level. But do you take it a step further, Marianne, so that if you're saying, okay, I want open borders, which is really the code that most of this crew is in. No border enforcement. Don't bother them when they're here unless they're heinous people. Let them do what they want. Do you have an obligation then to do more than just write a check to a charity?
It's always better to walk your talk, to Katie's point, and it's always better to help causes publicly or privately. It helps your credibility. But I think what you've seen across the board today, whether it's Hollywood activists and actors, institutions, establishments and others, people don't follow their lead anymore. They don't have the influence on the public discourse the way they used to. And on the other hand, there isn't the punishment anymore if there's one set of rules for you and another set of rules for somebody else, even when you take a stand on something. I think that's the big thing here.
Do you feel it's hypocritical for somebody like Barbara Streisand, who's a avowed liberal woman, to have the biggest security in the world, okay? I mean, you can't get close to her. all right? She's got guys, and she's got machine guns and tanks, all right? But then she said, oh, no, don't bother any, let them all in. Is that hypocritical?
It is, but she's not a public figure in the sense that she's an elected...
I'm not trying to make an excuse, and I'm sorry I singled her out, but I think everybody knows. You go to her website. All right, so you feel that is hypocritical.
I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
Of course it is. Of course it is.
You know, there are neighborhoods in this country that have been flooded with people who shouldn't be in the country. Hempstead, Long Island, where I live, M13, the Salvadoran gang, wreaked horrible havoc on people who have no power at all. Right. They're going, wait, how are these people here doing these terrible things? And yet you have these rich people out in Bel Air that Mr. Dobby pointed out going, wait, don't come up my driveway. I got 18 dogs. Go ahead, Katie.
Bill, that's the entire point. So, yes, it is one thing to give actors who have a lot of money and actresses who have a lot of money. They give checks to charities that help certain organizations. But this doesn't include the big picture about the fact that illegal immigration hurts the middle class and the poor Americans in this country. Unchecked immigration and unchecked immigration from countries that don't have central governments with terrorism running rampant hurts this country. And so Hollywood elites, you know, play around all day in their gated communities with their walls, their 24-hour security with their armed guards, while the rest of us, they preach to about certain things that we should be doing. That we are bigoted and intolerant if we do not allow these people in. Well, they have the luxury and they can afford to keep themselves away from all of that.
We must all be inclusive.
Except for them when it comes to their front door.
All right, ladies, I'm going to go back to my safe space while we have a commercial, and when we come right back. Brit Hume on the Iranian movie director criticizing the USA. I love this story. Again, this is an Iranian guy. The waters at the big race in Daytona. Right back.
The every 15 minutes Fox News headlines 24/7, Channel 115. The O'Reilly Factor, the #1 cable news show for 16 years and counting.
Thanks for staying with us. And Bill O'Reilly in the Hume Zone segment tonight, seizing the high moral ground in Iran. Movie director Asghar Farhadi won an Oscar last night for his foreign language film, The Salesman. But as Asghar didn't show up to get the statue. Instead, he's boycotting America.
I'm sorry I'm not with you tonight. My absence is out of respect for the people of my country and those of other 6 nations whom have been disrespected by the inhumane law that bans entry of immigrants to the U.S.
So Asghar gets an ovation from the Hollywood crew despite the fact that his own country is the biggest sponsor of terror in the world. We researched the director could find no condemnation of Iran's brutal Quds Force or the fact that it kept American citizens hostage until a nuke treaty was signed. Asghar didn't really mention that. Joining us from Florida, Brit Hume. I think this guy has some nerve to, you know, send out that nice woman to read his dopey statement. What say you?
Well, on the surface, Bill, it wouldn't make any sense because he's boycotting an event that has absolutely nothing to do with Donald Trump or his immigration order, except to the extent that Donald Trump and his immigration order were certain to be denounced at the event, where the attendees, and indeed I suspect the Academy as well, have nothing good to say about Donald Trump and basically can't stand the guy. So on the surface, you'd say, well, what sense does that make? The only thing I can think of, Bill, is that he thought that if he boycotted the event, remember, he didn't know he was going to get the award. He was nominated. His film was nominated. That I think he probably thought that if he boycotted the event to protest Donald Trump, that would all but assure that he got the Oscar, as indeed he did.
But I don't know if the Academy knew he was going to boycott before they voted. But there are 2 things in play. Number 1, Iran's a heinous country. All right, so don't tell me that, you know, I'm not coming because it's insulting the citizens of my country who are behind the mullahs who are just creating havoc and death and destruction all over the world. I mean, come on, it's ridiculous. That would be like, you know, Mussolini in the 30s, the Italians go, oh, you know, America, it's crazy. And he doesn't seem to know that this protest reflects poorly on him because of where he lives.
Well, I think that's true. And the other thing, I've read some reviews of his movie, which I haven't seen, although I've read about it and I saw the trailer, and it looks like a pretty good movie, actually. But it's not a political movie, and while some critics have strained to find some element of protest against the system of government and the government in Iran in it, I can't see, from what I can tell about it, that it has any of that. So that's not where he goes with his films either. So not only does he not protest his country and its policies and its behavior, with his words, he doesn't protest them with his art either.
Right. I mean, maybe he wants to take a look at his own neighborhood before he starts to criticize ours. But the Factor Crack research staff came up with an article in Der Spiegel, and I know you have a subscription down there in Florida, the German magazine,
online,
right, that did a piece on him in 2011 that said that Mr. Farhadi was punished by the Iranian government for criticisms he made about it, okay? And then they stopped him from filming some project. What did Mr. Farhadi do? He apologized so he could go on filming. This according to Der Spiegel, okay? So this guy,
well,
I mean, come on.
Well, in addition, of course, the Iranian government came out and spoke in support of what he had done and praised him for his boycott and so on. So it looks like he's in the fold, doesn't it, Bill?
It certainly does. Brit Hume, everyone. Waters on deck. He talks a little politics down at the Daytona 500. Right back with him. Segment tonight, Waters World. The Daytona 500 held over the weekend. Congratulations to Kurt Busch for winning the race, averaging almost 145 miles per hour. I did that this morning coming in from Long Island. Waters was down there asking the folks about the USA.
Kurt Busch wins the Daytona 500.
So what's NASCAR all about?
Man, it's about the racing, the fun, the intensity, and the adrenaline. You can't beat it.
I know nothing about NASCAR.
I know nothing about NASCAR either.
If I wanted to see people go left all Sunday, I'd watch Meet the Press.
That's very good. That's very funny.
What's the biggest problem facing this country right now?
I would say absolutely it's probably the fake news, for sure.
What are we going to do about this fake news business?
Just turn the channel. How about that?
I think immigration is probably my biggest concern.
How are we going to solve the illegal immigration issue?
We're going to build the wall.
How big's the wall?
You think there's really going to be a wall?
It's going to be huge.
Yeah?
Who's going to pay for it?
That's a good question.
I'm from Denmark. I'm an immigrant, legal.
It's a great story.
If you're not legal, get out.
Get on your horse and take your hunch right out of town.
Lack of education.
You're telling me. If people were educated, I'd be out of a job.
I don't believe that because you are that good at what you do.
For the love of Pete.
Not enough love. No matter what's going on in the country, you have to be together. We're all American, right?
I love this plan. I'm excited to be a part of it. Let's do it.
ISIS.
Wow, tell them how you really feel. In your opinion, what's the biggest problem facing this nation today?
The snowflakes.
You mean the global warming?
A little bit softer than that.
Tell me about it, sweetheart.
I think people need to change their attitudes and, have the right attitude and work hard and get things done. Everyone complains too much, in my opinion.
Bunch of whiners in this country?
Yes, a bunch of babies.
What are we going to do about these babies?
Make America tough again.
When you encounter an individual who disagrees with you politically, what do you guys do? Does that make you angry?
No. Everybody has a right to their opinion, so I'm good with it.
How do you react to that?
I unfriend them.
You got to respect them. I mean, everybody's got to show respect for each other.
I'm open-minded. I like to take other people's opinions into consideration.
Well, good. What do you think about all these radical left-wing protesters that keep clogging up the streets?
Well, they probably need to go to work like most Americans do, and basically they just got too much time on their hands to accomplish what? Nothing.
You're pretty sure of yourself, aren't you?
We're all American citizens and all want the best for our country.
If Trump doesn't deliver, what are we going to do?
Well, I don't think that's ever going to be an issue. He's already delivering.
I'll be a little upset, but, I have faith in him.
Tell me, if Trump doesn't follow through on what he says he's going to do, what are you going to do?
Just keep farming, I guess, man. I don't know.
What do you farm?
Cows, corn, soybeans.
What's the best cut of beef?
I'm a T-Bone guy. I don't know.
They used to call me T-Bone in high school.
Did they?
No.
I didn't think so.
Well, they're mighty good eating, too.
Can I put my collar up like you?
I'll allow it.
I don't think the commander would like it, but oh well.
Yeah, buddy.
That's going back pretty old school right there. I'm not hating on it.
Your collar?
I like it up. It's good.
Yeah, it's sexy. Very sexy.
You're gonna play this creeps game?
What do you think about O'Reilly? You a big Factor fan?
Yes, I am.
What's the best part of Bill's show?
The whole show.
You think O'Reilly would survive down here?
You know, he might be better off in the booth.
Just a bit outside.
Do you guys know who I am?
No.
Waters, and this is his world.
Nailed it.
I wish I could get that excited about butt.
All right, here's Waters. You know, Old School comes out on March 28th, my book.
Okay.
And it's about the battle between old school people and snowflakes. And
Yes.
the snowflakes is already into the lexicon,
It is.
right?
It's creeping into it. And these are old school people. And
Oh, that's for
they
sure.
hate the snowflakes.
Right.
Have you ever even been to a NASCAR race?
Yes, I have.
Did you actually watch it? Or did you just
yes, I watched
don't believe
it,
that.
and they went around the track, and then they went around again, and
I
then
have
again.
no idea what the sport's about. I respect
Right.
the sport.
It's cars racing, and whoever gets there first wins.
Wrong. I think it's about drinking and eating because that's what
No, that's in
everybody
the
did there.
stands. You can't drink in the car. Now, I noticed that the woman said she unfriends.
Yes.
That's Facebook?
Okay, so Bill, if you're a friend of
Yeah.
someone on Facebook and you don't like him anymore,
Yeah.
you click a button and you defriend them.
Does that make them feel bad?
Yeah.
Yeah, it does.
I
It's
think
a
so.
real diss, right?
Yeah, it's a big time
But you
diss.
don't have to do it in person.
No,
you
it's
could
like
just do it like
anonymous.
this.
Yeah, and then you don't have to touch
It's
them.
a snowflake rejection.
That's right.
Unfriend.
Exactly.
Are you on Facebook? What is
Yes, I am, Bill. I follow you. Don't unfriend me.
I'm not. I don't know what that is.
You have a Facebook page.
I do?
Yes.
I really?
Yes, it's
I have
huge.
one?
You have a lot of followers.
Okay. I think that's a different Bill O'Reilly, maybe the guy that makes tires. All right, Waters. Fact the tip today about trouble in Sweden. The tip, moments away.